It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I'd certainly like to say thank you to Jiří, Darius, and Camila, wherever she is around the room, because they really do a fantastic job with this event. And thank you for taking the time to join us. As Jiří said, I do like Poland. I like it so much I opened an office here. And that's one of the things that we really see as a great opportunity for Red Hat. One of the things that I do like is that this conference goes from strength to strength. My manager, Werner Knoblick, has spoken here many times, but I've spoken on the online conference, but I see huge interest in Poland in the open source movement. And if I look at where open source is, I've been in the industry now, 34 years, the technology industry, and the last 4.5 years I've been in the open source industry. I've actually seen Red Hat double. I've also seen the impact of open source in saving customers money, in allowing them freedom, really snowball. And it's great to see Enterprise DB stepping up and showing the next wave of open source in terms of companies that are going to go out there and disrupt the market. Because what we're doing is helping people achieve more with less. If you look at this simple graph, it looks back at 2010, and 75% of companies were using open source of some description. And according to predictions, by 2016, 99% of the enterprise class companies will have open source running mission critical systems. A simple fact is 28 of the world's stock exchanges in 24 countries running 80% of the world's markets are running open source platforms to run their technology. Well over half the financial transactions in the world are now running on open source software. So if that isn't mission critical, which is your savings, your bank accounts, your pensions, that's pretty important. And I like to think that Red Hat helped to pioneer that model. And again, we spent some time last night with the Enterprise DB folks and shared stories about how the market develops. And I do see Enterprise DB being where we were 8 or 9 years ago, at that tipping point where enterprise class companies start to really escalate the use of the technology. Now, it is interesting that once a company has moved to open source and they realize they get so much more for their money, they very rarely move back. And we see that with our middleware, we see that with our operating platforms, we see that with our management platforms. Companies recognize value, and economics tends to drive behavior in the long term. Just a little bit about Red Hat. We've now reached the point of about $1.3 billion, $1.3 billion. And in I guess, one of the most difficult financial periods in the world's history, we have seen Red Hat go through 44 quarters of unbroken growth, which in anybody's terms is a pretty reasonable record. And a lot of that is down to everybody in the room using technology, getting to grips with it, and then saying, you know what, this works, let's use more of it. And we've seen that across the world. Every country is just an open opportunity for open source, and we like to think that we help that move. Now, one of the things that I'd like to do is explain what it is that we do, because we don't just write software, because we contribute to an open source product. So if we take Linux, for instance, we contribute 13%, 14% of that. I think on JBoss we contribute a little more, but every year we get more and more community around JBoss and more contribution from others. And as this takes its own life, we get to steer and direct. But what we find is open source is very innovative and very interesting as a development model. It takes the best brains anywhere in the world, allows them to contribute in an open fashion. But open source changing every day with someone adding a new innovation is not necessarily enterprise friendly. If you're running a data center, once you've got it working 24/7, you want it to stay working. You only want to change something you have to change. That's the way enterprises work. You know what? Creativity, you don't want to change too fast. And we put that layer in between the open source community and the enterprise. We actually what people are doing is outsourcing to us the management of an open source product, and it's paying a small amount for a subscription to take a share of that outsourced work. And this model that we pioneered is now being taken on by other open source companies because it works. It's an interesting model, it's a subscription model, but it means we participate, we direct, and we manage our position in the community upstream. We then integrate everything with partners, with ISVs, with hardware people, and then we put out a finished product and we look after it for 10 years. And that's what we do. We make it enterprise friendly. And having done that, what we do is we basically provide customers with a subscription, and we've built a machine to not only just do the QA, but provide the necessary value that you would expect from any expensive licensed product in an open source environment. So things like knowledge base, customer portal, we've won many prizes for the customer portal that customers get to use. Software assurance in terms of intellectual property rights protection, support services, pick up the phone, get bugs fixed, security patches. 99% of security incidents are fixed within a day. And that's not the kind of thing that you can legislate for and put people in place in a company and expect to do it yourself. So all of this stuff goes on with roughly 6,000 people in Red Hat, people placed all the way around the world, as well as people in the community. And the good thing is everything we do eventually goes back to the community. It gets used. So you can actually pick your support model. You can choose to use completely open source code, or you can choose to outsource the management of your operating software. And we're very proud to have pioneered that model, and we think it works well, and we're seeing more and more companies in the open source environment take that model up. So with everybody in the room, you can choose a relationship with Red Hat, whether you want to be a certified engineer, whether you want to, some people might want to be an employee of Red Hat. We now have an office here, and as we build our business, we'll be recruiting people. You might want to be a partner of Red Hat, system integrator partner, or you may want to be a key user or even a contributor. There's lots of ways to be working with Red Hat. But I think the key that we're doing is if you talk to Red Hat 6-7 years ago, you would have had one story, which was Linux. We helped to transform and commoditize the operating environment for servers in the data center. But when you look at the list of products that we now have, we're trying to become the open source infrastructure company for the enterprise. And if you look up there, you can see some very expensive, very high priced, in many cases, very commoditized software that Ed was mentioning commands a very big share of a market and therefore can command quite high pricing. And we disrupt. We present alternatives to the user to have freedom from license fees, to pay a support fee, and take technology that is as good, if not better in some cases. And as I say, once people have got used to the model of taking their budget, and I don't think there'll be anybody in the room that is in a position where their company is saying, here, have a lot more money and spend it on IT. Because I've yet to see a CIO who doesn't have cost as a key part of his management function, taking cost out, not just of the company, but of IT. And as they see the opportunities to use more and more open source products in a professional capacity, we see that transition happening faster and faster. One of the things I want to talk about today is really where we see the infrastructure world going. And by infrastructure, I mean everything that you need to build a platform as a service to run your operating system. And we talk about open hybrid cloud. And the reason I mention this is we see cloud now starting to become early adopter territory. Could I see a show of hands of everybody who's actively using technology in the cloud? Anybody use Facebook? It's cloud, it's collaboration in the cloud. Salesforce.com, it's an application in the cloud. It's been pioneered for a long time. I mean, I look at the cloud as a little bit like the electricity story. When you walk into a hotel with your laptop, you expect to plug into the wall and get electricity. You expect it to be 230 volts, you expect it to be 50 hertz, you expect your plug to fit and your laptop to run, or your loudspeakers, your PA system, your television, because you're getting electricity delivered down a pipe anywhere you want it. Well, why wouldn't 5 years' time we get computing down a pipe anywhere we want it? Why would we not get that? Why would that not happen? Do you really want to spend $150 million building a data center if you could plug into the internet and get computing? And that journey has begun. And when I was at the Gartner event in October in Barcelona, there was a show of hands like this where people said 90% of the room, CIOs in the room, said they were working with cloud in some way in their organization. And then the second question was, how many people are running mission critical? A lot of hands went down. Not yet ready to say I can go in anywhere, plug in and get it. However, if you look at Salesforce.com, which is the single most successful company, application software as a service company in the world, multi-billion-dollar company now, that's a mission-critical piece of software. And most of the major enterprises, ourselves included, are running Salesforce.com 24/7, 365 in support functions, in customer relationship functions. We're using applications in the cloud as a mission-critical site. Not only that, we're already in a position where we're hybridizing that because we're linking internal applications with Salesforce and running them in tandem, so we're actually hybridizing our use of Salesforce. This is the way the industry is moving. And as Ed mentioned, it's all of these little movements that give you tipping points, and all of a sudden it becomes the day job. Why would you not sign up for email in the cloud? You have security issues, you have issues about where the data is held. Those things will get solved. They'll all become the day-to-day things. And what we're positioning now is to be able to take this open hybrid cloud and put the products and technologies in place so that customers can go on this journey. A couple of pieces of news. We acquired a company called ManageIQ. This is part of the strategy of putting in place the management platforms for hybrid cloud, where you may have a VMware estate, a Microsoft estate, you may have a KVM estate, you want to manage the lifecycle of your applications, you have Amazon as a cloud provider, Rackspace as a cloud provider, perhaps a local integrator or a telco here as a cloud provider. You want to manage your applications across that entire space. That's the area we see as the critical investment area for building the next generation clouds. Also, development areas, putting in place development platforms internally or externally as a platform as a service is going to be a critical element. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And finally, on the top right-hand corner, you'll see that one of the pieces of breaking news is we opened the Polish office. We have already recruited 5 people locally. We have roughly 600 people now in Eastern Europe as Red Hat. There's about 550 in Czech, and then there's a lot of others across Eastern Europe. But it is a key investment area for us. Let's take a look at what cloud is doing in terms of pressure on customers. As an IT department, you typically used to deliver the services to your customer. The customer used to get what you gave them. They would put in a request for a server. If it took 90 days, it took 90 days. They want a new application. They want a new desktop. It was controlled by the IT group. Right now, they can take a credit card, sign on with Amazon.com, and be up and running in minutes with new server, new application. That is putting serious pressure on IT departments. It means we're getting business users, business functions, creating shadow IT groups in their own departments. It's very similar to the way Salesforce.com was adopted. If you look at 10 years ago, let's say 10 years ago, in the CRM industry, company decides to go for CRM, typically a 1-year evaluation cycle, 3 months to get it down to 3 vendors. 3 vendors would fight like anything for the next 9 months with the customer. Decision would be made, 3 months negotiating the contract. We're already 15 months in and we haven't done anything yet. And then 9 months trying to implement it and get the first departments up. Now we're 2 years in. And in those 2 years, every single department would have taken a credit card and signed up with Salesforce.com. It's the way Salesforce.com got round the IT groups. They became a shadow IT organization, and that's what's happening with cloud. People are spinning stuff up in the development environment based on a credit card at a very low. In some cases, they're doing it free. We provide OpenShift free as a test. And there's 180, actually no, it's 200,000 applications running in the cloud on Red Hat software in our own cloud environment, platform as a service, that people have been spinning up and running up, because it's our test for how platform as a service can be delivered. So this is putting a lot of pressure on the IT departments. And what we see happening is the IT departments are going to have a strategy where they're going to allow their internal departments under supervision, under policy control, to use internal IT, to use external IT, and to balance the use of that. So they have to put in place the systems to be able to manage hybrid cloud, because it's going to happen. They're going to have that level of control, because again, in many industries, finance industry, pharmaceutical industry, government and security, the actual governance of IT and the use of IT is critical. So I just want to take a very, very short journey through how you would get to hybrid cloud and the kind of things you're going to have to put in place to do it. And if you look at the typical transformation, you want a development environment that's pretty homogeneous. You want to be able to deploy applications. You want to take legacy applications. You want to create a data center or a situation where you can use internal, external, and then move to hybrid cloud because you've standardized your solutions. So I think one of the things we want to look at is development frameworks. And one of the things Red Hat has done very, very clearly is produce development environments like OpenShift, like JBoss, where you can use any development tools, industry standard development frameworks, and still deploy, whether it's lightweight deployment, heavyweight deployment. And this is critical to be able to use development, accelerate development, industrialize your software development, because in many cases, the quality of the application software or your interface to the user is a mission-critical part of the business. The next challenge is to get to a common infrastructure platform to move from physical to multiple virtual and then to be able to move to the cloud. And typically that is done in a data center that looks horribly like this. You've got a bit of everything. You've got to take it from a bit of everything. You've got private cloud, you've got some mainframes, you've got client servers, you've got public cloud, and you want to get that managed and under control. And the whole idea is putting in place management frameworks so you can choose your environment, whether it's a VMware environment, Microsoft environment, Red Hat environment, mixed environment, and start to organize that and manage that so you can manage life cycles of your application software that you should be developing in a very open environment, delivering into your managed environment. And what you're going to see is this framework of a centralized management platform start to manage your cloud approach, where you have all of the infrastructure being streamlined into an environment that you can manage almost as an umbrella management platform, and then be able to take applications from one environment to another environment to another environment, even shared environments. Because as we move to the cloud, that's the way companies are going to run their IT. You do not want to invest in another data center if 2 weeks of the year you have a peak workload. I'll give you an example. DreamWorks. Every time they have to build a film, a 3D film such as The Incredibles or Cars, it takes 80 million CPU hours. They run 30,000 cores in the cloud, in-house. They just have this virtual cloud that they run, and they run it to the point where they can deliver a film. And if they miss a delivery point, it's typically a holiday weekend where they can maximize the gross take. They miss that delivery point, it has real revenue implications. So their cloud approach has to be 30,000 cores, expand to this when we need it, and it has to run 24/7 until those 80 million CPU hours have rendered that film. And that's the technology that is in use today, because we work with DreamWorks. Now, where we're investing is clearly to bring this open hybrid cloud message to market. We've built OpenShift platform as a service. It's available in the cloud. It's sitting on Amazon, but it's basically free for use. And as we move forward, we now start to make OpenShift available on premise, so people can build development clouds and actually start to use these for deployment as well, internally, purely with a single set of packages from Red Hat. But as we move to getting cloud forms into play, That's where you're going to be able to do application lifecycle across a hybrid cloud environment. And if you look at the product set we put in place, we're really trying to give everybody the option of building your next generation infrastructure with the middleware, with the operating systems, with the virtualization, or even choice of virtualization, with the management platforms, with the development environments, so you can build that entirely on open source. So you don't have to pay a single license fee again if you don't want to. Or you can choose to if you do want. If you think the technology is worth paying for, then you can pay for it. So with that, I'd like to point out that we believe that open innovation is the area that open source is contributing to this. Every one of the clouds, every one of the new industry, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Yahoos, all of the next generation of industries of information and service providers, all running on open source. It's all developed in the community. It's all supported by professional companies like ourselves. And it is showing the way that open source is helping to create the innovation for the next generation. And what we want to do is to be clearly a part of that for the long term. We want to continue driving the model of taking the best of the open source community, industrializing that for enterprise use, taking the workload off of managing the life cycle of open source products and letting you do what you do best, which is to use the technology to run your business. So with that, I'd like to thank you and hand back to you.
Thank you, Giel.